Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive into something absolutely wild. We are looking at how a 20-year-old YouTuber's debut film is literally shaking the very foundations of the modern movie industry. It's this fascinating shift where the traditional power dynamics of the entire entertainment world are just being completely turned on their head. Right now, if you look at the box office, there is a super stark contrast playing out. On one side, you have the traditional Hollywood model, right? These massive $200 million studio projects that the source neutrally points out are increasingly being dismissed by viewers as, quote, creatively bankrupt corporate slop. And honestly, they're bombing incredibly hard. But then on the flip side, we're seeing these highly successful, super low-budget indie horror flicks that are entirely driven by internet creators. It's a literal modern-day David versus Goliath scenario. And nothing illustrates this shockwave better than this number, $80 million. That is the massive box office draw pulled in on its opening weekend by the indie film Backrooms. And you know what makes that number so staggering? The film was directed by Kane Parsons, who is just a 20-year-old YouTuber. It's so ironic. You have this young internet creator who is effectively humiliating modern Hollywood studios, successfully crossing internet culture right over into the mainstream and just completely dominating theaters in the process. So, entering the Backrooms, let's see how this narrative actually builds. Okay, so what's the plot? We follow this guy named Clark. He's an architect, and he's going through a really rough patch, struggling with a failing furniture business, dealing with a messy divorce, and facing his own personal demons. Well, one night, he's checking out some strange electrical issues down in his basement, and the impossible happens. He accidentally falls literally right through a wall and breaches reality itself. Suddenly, he's wandering around this endless, mysterious maze, and he's documenting the whole thing with a video camera. Eventually, his therapist, Mary, gets a creepy message from him. She actually tries to go in and rescue him, only to find herself totally trapped in this bizarre alternate dimension as well. Moving right along to mastering liminal terror. To really get why this movie is so effective, we have to look at the original internet urban legend or creepypasta that inspired it. It's all based on the concept of a liminal space. Now, what is that? It's basically a location that looks superficially normal. It's filled with familiar, super mundane objects from our everyday world, but there's this nagging, inescapable, eerie sense of wrongness to it. The film captures this vibe perfectly by just tossing out all your typical horror tropes. You know, you aren't going to find any dark, dense woodlands or super scary, shadow-filled basements here. The terror actually comes from a sterile, almost tediously normal-looking environment. The Backrooms operate on some really strict visual rules. The source praises the film for using incredible practical set design and relying on very minimal computer graphics. Every single thing is painted this sickly yellow, it's lit by those loud, buzzing neon strip lights, and it forms endless corridors that have absolutely zero logical architectural pattern. It ends up creating this deeply primal, crushingly claustrophobic fear. And it's weird because the environment is so incredibly bright, you can see absolutely everything, but it vehemently refuses to make any logical sense. To emphasize just how eerie this feeling is, the critique humorously compares the unnerving wrongness of the maze to a very specific, slightly off-kilter, everyday encounter. They say it's, quote, like having a casual conversation with someone from Aberdeen. There's something just not quite right about the place. You know that feeling deep down, but because you can't pin it onto anything specific, the entire experience just becomes that much more paranoid and disturbing. Let's look at characters and psychology. Now, the film creates this absolutely fascinating central tension. On one side, we have Clark, right? He's a rational architect by trade. He's an expert in design, construction, and spatial logic. And on the other side, we have the Backrooms, which is a completely irrational dimension. It is so compelling to watch this totally rational man pit his understanding of reality against a space that completely defies spatial reality and rationality. You watch him get slowly undone by his obsession to try and understand a space that outright refuses to be understood. And as the narrative unfolds, we learn something really interesting. The dimension effectively acts as a dark reflection of Clark and Mary's personal issues, things like depression, alcoholism, and the fallout of that complicated divorce. The environment actively reshapes itself to fit the protagonist's tortured mindscape, which the analysis compares to the classic video game Silent Hill 2. Now, hardcore lore purists of the original internet creepypasta might be a bit surprised or even upset by these character-driven changes, but it really works well for translating the core concept into an actual cinematic experience. We also have to give a massive tip of the hat to the lead actors here. Ejiofor delivers a really solid, dependable performance that actually rewards his talents, while Renati Rini perfectly complements the psychological tension as the therapist Mary. The reviewer points out that both of them do a phenomenal job grounding these totally bizarre supernatural elements in very real human struggles. It elevates the material way beyond just a simple monster movie. But it isn't flawless. Let's look at the third act stumble. So Acts 1 and 2 deliver this highly intriguing setup. It's full of slow-building psychological tension and poses these really complex questions. But then we hit Act 3, and it seemingly devolves into the main character just being chased through a maze by a scary monster. Now, the critique makes sure to point out that it isn't terrible, but sacrificing that uniquely weird, rationality-defying buildup for a somewhat generic climax feels like a slight missed opportunity to do something much more complex. Zooming out, we have a Hollywood paradigm shift. Because honestly, this massive box office upset, it isn't just an organic fluke. The analysis concludes that it represents an entire decade of repressed audience hunger finally finding an outlet. What are audiences actually craving right now? They want daring, artistically ambitious projects. They want things made by passionate creatives rather than focus-grouped corporate committees. They are looking for lean, efficient filmmaking that relies on genuinely strong ideas instead of obscene budgets and exhausting promo campaigns. Hollywood studios are currently failing to provide this, and audiences are speaking extremely loudly with their wallets. So as we wrap up this explainer, this undeniable industry shift leaves us with one deeply provocative thought about the future of film. If Hollywood can't provide what audiences actually want, will independent creators permanently take over the industry? It is a fascinating question and one we are absolutely going to see answered at the box office in the coming years.